how genius works. We got it.
Yes. So what this everything works this way. Genius just a term. And I'm going to start with the ego. We all know about the ego. Half of us are psychologists and so on. And so, the way I define the ego is a little container for all our thoughts and beliefs and things that we've learned over our lives. Some of them are valuable and others are not. The ego can trap us very easily in our, what I call our individual subconscious. It's sort of fed into the ego without us knowing it. And so one of the purposes, that I've found is, how do I expand my ego and my insight beyond my own personal feelings and experiences? And I was really fortunate to grow up on a farm out in the country. We had a river and creeks, and as a boy, I'd climb trees, and one afternoon I climbed to the top of the weeping willow tree, and it was windy and the tree was rocking, and I just disappeared into the infinite. So peaceful, so deep. And so I want to tell that story here in this slide. Our egos are just our thoughts, and I think it's important to realize that our thoughts, even our positive thoughts, certainly positive thoughts are better than negative thoughts, but our thoughts are an approximation of reality, of a reality. For example, if I just bit into a ripe tomato, which I used to do as a boy, we had these tomatoes by the creek, I could describe the taste, I could describe the experience, but as good a writer as I might be, it's nothing like the actual experience. And so our ego tends to feed out, block out things that we don't like, we're afraid of. So that's the ego. It's a collection of thoughts. And it's fed by each of our individual subconscious. And part of our work is to be more conscious of ourselves and these things that feed our ego. We need our ego to live in this world. We need our ego so we know not to try to fly from the roof, or other things that our fantasies might bring forward. And so, but we need to remember who's in charge. We need to ride the ego, not have the ego ride us. We used to call the ego the pig. And so I drew a picture of a pig and asked the question, are you riding the pig or is the pig riding you? And I think that's a question we should always ask ourselves. What is driving us? Where does it come from? Well, here's the next level. Collective unconscious. So there's a collective unconscious, our individual subconscious or unconscious, and then there's the collective unconscious, and that would be all the thoughts that exist in the world, all the thoughts and experiences we've been exposed to. And then comes what I call the pool of great knowledge. It's all the knowledge of humanity, all we've known and learned over eons. And lastly, there's the ground of being, which is infinite. It's beyond the pool of great knowledge. It's this infinite space that we're all part of. We're all part of this ground of being. But oftentimes we're not in contact with it. So the ego is a compass. It guides us in this world. It's, like I said, it's normal knowledge, it's comparative thought, it's love, fear, right, wrong, useful. Oops. Ah. So the challenge is to feed the ego from the ground of being. Individual subconscious, like I said, is our history, our emotions, tensions, forces. Some things too horrific to remember. In our dream groups, we dig some of those up and deal with them. And the collective unconscious is memories plus great knowledge of the species, field of archetypes, successful behavior patterns, dreams. Then the pool of great knowledge is full knowledge of life, all forms, from bacteria to whales, grasses, trees, all the living organisms. This often comes to us through dreams. And then the ground of being, which I call the life force, the great intelligence, creation and destruction, the formless energy, you could call it God. But this is available to all of us because we're part of the ground of being. But the challenge is to listen to it, is to connect with it. And that's what genius is. That's what I call integrative presence, or being here now. Our ability then for our ego to be fed from these other levels of consciousness, mainly from the ground of being. And I think in my story, when I was up in the willow tree and kind of disappeared into the ground of being, it's beyond description. I'm sure all of you have had glimpses of this in your life. And part of the process today is, I told you one of my stories. I'd like to hear a couple of your stories about when you had this deep, enlightened experience where you touched on the ground of being. It would make a great meeting today. So we'll put this next slide up as a background. And if somebody could help me with the sharing part. So this is the still version of it. As you can see, I put some words in each of those circles, the collective unconscious, individual subconscious. Next level is defined by polarities. It's defined by the phenomenal world. And then there's the flow of heaven. The imaginal realm, people call it. It's something that comes to you in a dream or in a moment of insight. And then the great intelligence, the ground of being, God's grace, eternal presence. It's the sea that we swim in, but we somehow don't know it. We have to really work to find our way into this great intelligence, into this deep wisdom. And I know if I've had my experiences, and this chart reminds me of that. I sent it to Tim on something else, and he said, wow, this is a Mandela of enlightenment, right? I call it the awakened self. I love the word awakened, better than enlightenment, because it seems like you just wake up from, all the bad dreams you've been having, all the things that have limited you and held you down and created sorrow. At some point in time, you wake up from that and you can really enjoy life and help others. So what I'd like to do is, since I have this up, I can't see everybody who has their hands up. So I'll leave it up for a minute, but then I'd like to hear some stories from each of you where you had this deep connection with the grounded being, with the great intelligence. Just a brief story from each of you. I gave you mine, so I'm going to ask you to share some of your stories. So I'll take this down now. Does this all make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
I think Jasmine has her hand up.
Okay, go ahead.
I
Jasmine.
guess mine was the moment that I saw Samantha Rose. I knew that I had a purpose, and I knew I'm doing something right in the world. I knew that everything was okay. Everything was okay because
Mm,
she does that for me. Yeah, she makes everything all right for me.
mm.
Yeah. Yep. That was my moment.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Who else has a moment in time when they touched a deeper level of consciousness? Linda.
When my sister was on her last legs, she died of ALS. I was visiting her. It was my last time I was visiting her. And I had to leave for the airport early. I was downstairs. They have a baby cam so they can hear her.
Mm,
And I went in to see her, but she was sleeping and she so needed her sleep. I didn't want to wake her. So I went down and I started to talk to her son and I said, I'm going to go. And then I heard her and she had no voice except just to make sounds. And she was, ah, ah, ah. And her husband was saying, Evelyn, I don't know what you want. And I thought, oh my God, she's awake. And I ran up and I loved her and loved her and loved her and loved her and kissed her and kissed her and kissed her and kissed her and said, I love you, 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 I love you. And that was the last time I saw her, but it was something beautiful.
yeah. Thank you, Linda. Lovely. These moments come on us unexpectedly, I found. And sometimes we just throw them away, say,
Samuel.
Emil.
It was about 8 or 10 years ago. I went to Ecuador and spent 2 weeks in the rainforest with the shaman.
Mm,
And we were doing ayahuasca a couple of times. And when we got to this river with a very strong current, I couldn't leave the shore. I was just drawn. I was mesmerized, and the campsite was like 100 yards in, and I couldn't leave the shore. And the shaman said, be careful because the river can pull you in. And I remembered reading Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse about the life of the Buddha and as a teenager, and how he met the river boatman, and he merged with the river. And I spent the whole night, aside from the ayahuasca, this was more powerful, just merging with the magnetic draw of the river. And it was like the river and I were one. It was very powerful.
wow. Thank you.
Oh,
Tim?
Yeah, I wasn't going to share, but then Samuel made me share with his story. I too was on an ayahuasca journey, and on the table, they had a picture of Christ, Buddha, Kuan Yin. They leave it open, all those energies. And of course, you can have divine visions. And I had this vision of connecting with the divinity on the table, and my body and mind exploded with compassion and love. I absolutely couldn't contain it. It was like exploding out of me. And all I could think to do was to share it. I wanted to share love. I wanted to share healing. It was the most overwhelming force flowing through me. And I said, if this is heaven, I'm in. This was the most unbelievable, beautiful. It has stayed with me 30 years. I mean, it's the most unbelievable, powerful connection to that place where there's compassion and love and healing.
Thank you, Tim. It's beautiful.
I have one.
Ronnie.
So what the first experience that I ever had of realizing there was something more than my little self, my ego, was when I was 15 years old. I was at a church camp. So I'm up in the mountains. And of course, I think I've shared with you before that my father was a fundamentalist minister. And so everything that I knew about God was through that. I had no idea that there was more of an expansion. So we're sitting out under the stars, and fire is going, and it's singing Kumbaya, Lord, and all of that's going on. And I just looked up at the stars, and something just happened in me. I saw that there was this greatness that I had no idea how beautiful and magnificent life was. And I've actually written about it. And that was the first time I knew that there really is. To me, it was like, I think I said, oh my God, there is a God, because it was that feeling of expansion that I did not know through what I was learning. And that started a whole spiritual journey for me right there when I was 15. And so that was mine.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Yeah.
Michael.
When I was 22 years old, my friend Steve Rogers and I routinely went on high mountain backpacking up around the John Muir Trail through Mineral King and Sequoia. One particular trip, we decided to go way up to, I think it was an area called White Bear Lake in Mineral King. Now, Mineral King is famous because it has the rocks are heavily impregnated with mineral deposits. You could pick up a rock and put it in the water and you'll see rainbow colors.
Wow.
Because of all of the mineral deposits that are in the rock. And so we hiked up to the end of the trail and began traversing up to the point where we reached White Bear Lake above 10,000 feet, which is above timberline. The trees stop growing basically when you get that high. And we camped on an outcropping of rock and stone, just scattered. And as the sun began to fade on the light on all the mountaintops around us, the mountains began to change color as the various rich mineral deposits in the earth around began to reflect different colors. And we were surrounded by a rainbow festival of colors as the light shifted from full to dark. And I was in a fantasy land of color, and I felt the whole earth and the whole around me was magical in a way. It was literally a revelation that the world was not what it appeared to be. And there were no drugs, by the way, involved in this. This was just real. And so even at age 22, I had gotten a very strong indication of how powerful I had this strong sense in this experience of a deep underlying reality that had been revealed to me. And it stayed with me to this day. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Thank you. Levita.
Paul, let me just say, Afton's had her hand up
Afton, I'm sorry.
Afton.
virtually for quite a while.
Thank you, Bill. I think I've had a lot of experiences under hallucinogenics, but what I'm going to share with you stands out because it was totally unexpected, and it stands out in my mind as awesome because of that. I was traveling on the plane, and I was 3 hours in Charlottesville layover or between planes, and I was tired. I walked up to get a Jamba Juice, and as I went to pay for it, this very tall African-American man said, "Oh no, that's on me." That immediately set a love energy, I think. I was just astounded. I walked away. I found a rocking chair in the middle of a corridor where you went from the international to the national. I put my headphones on with 60s iPod, my 60s, and I went into an altered state watching all these people in all their different ways of walking and hurrying or dragging a child or being carried on a stretcher. And I became every one of those people. It was like we were all one in that energy. And I never wanted to leave. I did not want to get on the plane. It was the most incredible 3 hours I've ever spent. So thank you.
Thank you, Afton. That's beautiful. Bill.
Thanks, Paul. So I had an ayahuasca experience thanks to Tim. And I'll share that. I'll just say in preface to that every time there's a synchronicity, I feel the presence of God. I take that as, that is evidence of my higher power is synchronicities. But this, and I'll share one of those at another point when there's time. But regarding the ayahuasca experience, it came to me gradually. It was all of a sudden. I felt something which was like a line drawing that became a woodcut, that became a black and white, then it became color, and motion was added. And what came to me was this: there were two paths that went infinitely in all directions, two lines that were parallel and were infinite in either direction. And I realized that one represented heaven, the other represented hell. And I had the ability to step from one to the other and or back. And that this was right now. This was not the afterlife. This was life on earth. I could be in either heaven or hell. It was my choice. That was my great insight that I received as a result. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful. Whitney and then Sam. You have to unmute yourself, Whitney.
First, my apologies to everyone, and thank you, Linda. Mine was not through ayahuasca, it was through LSD. But I was 19 maybe, and I was working in Yellowstone National Park one summer at Old Faithful Cafeteria. And on our day off, we'd often go out and take drugs and whatever. And I was near Yellowstone Lake, and God, I remember it like yesterday. And I remember looking at the tree and realizing the tree is alive. I am one with the tree. And then everything became one. And it was evidence of God's presence, or a one presence. And it, as many have said, it has affected me till today. It was my first realization of one.
One.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Okay, Sam.
Yeah. When my son was 2 years old, he's now 50. My first wife and our two kids were visiting a family, staying in a family cabin in the woods in North Carolina. And Chris, my son, and I were walking down this road, paved road, but very, very narrow in the woods. And there was a dogwood tree with white blooms. And I picked my son up and showed him the dogwood flower. And he was just, his face just lit up. His eyes were wide open as he looked at it and studied it. And then about 25 years later, I was at a private retreat up at La Casa de Maria in Montecito near Santa Barbara on a private retreat. And I had been there a few days and was walking around early one morning, and I noticed the morning glories there. And I was just in the right space, and this happened to me that I saw it as if I were seeing it for the first time, which is really quite a rare experience. We all have so many experiences over and over again. But on that day, I saw that morning glory, which I've always loved, but I saw it for the first time. And it was the enlightenment, I think, was realizing or experiencing the beauty and simplicity of life. So,
Thank you.
Hey, Paul, Thomas has had his hand up.
Okay, Thomas, and then Nita.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I really appreciate, Paul, your beautiful presentation, and it made me go back to a time at the beginning of graduate school. I had just gotten back from South America, and I was laying on the grass and looking up at the sky and feeling very small. By the way, I love the way ego, the definition of edging God out, EGO, I thought was such an insightful statement. But when I think I was probably about 25 at the time, I had been to another country, experienced another culture, and literally felt one with that culture. And I saw an airplane go by, and it was probably 1,000 feet in the air. And I felt a part of everything. It was just an insightful moment that I didn't need to be anything or anybody, but just to be of service and to be one with everything. And I felt that at times with trees, with animals, with different participation in life, to just be one. And when we read the statement of the mastery circle, and we end with that phrase, one, I just love that. It resonates. So thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. Thank you. Let's see, Nita, and then,
Rena has had her hand up.
okay.
And
Who-
Pamela, and Pamela.
Okay,
Nita first.
so Nita first, and then we'll go.
When I moved to Los Angeles in 1970, one of the first people I met was this Vietnam vet, and he turned out to be a lifelong friend. And he introduced us to hallucinogenic experiences. And it was funny because his name was the same as my biological father, and who I never met. And so there was a tie between us, and he was a crusty guy, and he got crustier every year. And, and I just now got the news, today is his birthday, that he has died. And so it's ironic that we're talking about these experiences when he basically lived his whole life in that place, with or without drugs. He was an artist and a shaman, and I'm just saying goodbye to Andy Ayers. Thank you.
Okay, Rena?
I was once in Alaska, deep in the woods, with Tom Franklin Daly, who was a member of the Mastery Circle, who brought me into this beautiful family. And so he was doing some management training in some fishing village. And one day, as a treat, they took us into another tiny island on a boat that had a hot spring. So here we are in Alaska, hiking to look at this hot spring by some guides. And then we asked to be left there alone because the guide had actually his girlfriend with him, and I could see that he had the day off from his fishing job. And I kind of figured they want to be alone together. So I said, we'll find our way to the boat. Just go and have your own time. And they said, but don't, watch out for the time and the hour. And the point is, the time has come around 3 o'clock. We decided to go back to the boat. I thought I knew the trail. Walking. And we actually walked throughout this tiny island, and we got to the same place, and I could not find a way out to see where the boat was. And we panicked because it got to be darker and darker. We did it twice. And there was a moment of like, what's going on? Like I needed to, I prayed for another intelligence to shed light, because I knew my awareness will not get me out of here. So I needed to see the situation differently. And I just like, what am I not seeing? How can I get out of here? And at that moment, I started looking at the trees differently. I started looking how the trees were organized, where there was like a center tree, and every tree had a family of, like a circle of a family tree around it. And I just started relax and paying attention how the trees are organized. And notice that, there's logic, there's magic, there is a pattern. And I just like enjoyed finding patterns in spacing of trees, forgetting how anxious I am about finding the pathway. And through looking at that, the pathway appeared, and I found the boat. And that was an experience of relaxing the mind, and something appeared that I've been using ever since. It was a good for me.
Thank you. Beautiful. Pamela? Or Patricia, sorry. No. Somebody else had their hand up.
Pamela.
Well, Pamela, okay.
Oh, there she is.
There she is, okay. All right, Pamela.
All right, okay, guys. All right, so, yeah. I was in New York City, and I was selling tickets at a movie theater, and I could see on 3rd Avenue, the cars go by, and I saw this car I'd never seen before. And I said, what's that? What's that? I was immediately glommed onto that car. And the guy who was carrying the people into the movie theater, he said, hey, Pamela, that's the brand new car, the brand new XK Jaguar. I said, and it was like something way beyond the car. And from that moment on, every single day, I went all over New York City and to every single Jaguar place. And the XK Jaguar with 2 seats, very low, could make turns faster than any other car, was there. And I did this, and I didn't understand why, but okay, soon after that, I was on my way on a motorcycle from New York to Los Angeles, got all the way to Los Angeles, and I had so much energy inside of me, and my ego was like, I said, dear God, please help me. I just, you know, I was walking around in life with my fists like this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. Because both my parents told me about setting goals and everything. And I said, please release me of this. I need some peace, please. That was my prayer. And soon after that, I heard of Tassajara in Carmel Valley, where the monks are. And I thought maybe I could go speak to the monks. So I took my motorcycle up there. Their mouths were open. They never saw a lady on a broken down motorcycle, but they welcomed me. And at 3 o'clock, I'd start getting very cold because I never had the right clothes for my cross country trip. And they gave me a coat of many colors and they blessed me. And I was driving down and this dirt road way up in the mountains. You never could see anything coming in the next turn. I went head on, crashed right into a van bus, went right through the windshield, needed 100 stitches all over my face after that. But what happened? The prayer was answered. I left my body. I guess I was dead. Total whiteness, total peace.
Yeah.
Complete. And I saw my body on the ground and I heard my motorcycle and somewhat I came back. And what do you think happened? Because just at that time, a car happened to be going up, dropping off a child. It was an XKE Jaguar, the fastest car in the world at that time, could make fast turns. This was before iPhones. It was zoomed down to get somebody's phone call, to get the ambulance and so forth and so on. In the process of all this, I mean, there was one miracle after another, after another, after another. I realized that my ego, if it's in partnership with the universe, that is the way to live together. And that's been that way since then. And it was a huge gift. And on we go.
Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful.
Levita?
Levita? No? Okay. No.
Paul, you have 10 more minutes.
Okay.
Oh, Sam is raising.
Sarah.
Sarah and then Sam.
Okay. I live near the river that goes through the city. And there are these beautiful, beautiful bridges over the river that have been around for centuries. They've been destroyed by flood and rebuilt. They were destroyed by Hitler's army and rebuilt. And they're just absolutely beautiful. And the sunsets on these rivers, on these bridges, are just breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking. And I watch people every time I cross the bridge. I watch people, and as they go and get on the bridge, they stop. Everybody stops, young, old, rich, poor, white, black, all different, we all come from different backgrounds, and everybody stops and watches the sunset. And a few months ago, I was on the bridge and I saw people stopping, and it was just such a beautiful union with everybody and with the universe. The fact that we all stop and look at the same thing and in awe, that right there is proof that we're all connected. We're connected to that sunset, to the earth, and we're connected to each other. And if we could all just hold on to that instead of holding on to a little bit of differences that we have, I think we would all live in a much better world. But I think the sunset is the proof that we're all connected.
Thank you, Sarah. That's beautiful. Samuel, are you raising your hand?
Yeah. In my early 20s, I was in San Francisco in the back of my van, and I experienced a state, I went into the state of total liquid black void terror. it was the most agonizing feeling of my life. And then on this trip to Ecuador that I mentioned, I was in a cave and I wasn't able to keep up with the other people. So I was stuck by myself in the middle of the cave. And it was totally silent and totally dark. And I went into a meditation and I experienced that black void, but it was pure bliss. So I got to experience the polar opposite of that. It was exquisite feeling.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah, I know we did a retreat in Joshua Tree where we sat alone for a couple of days. And I remember the moment I was looking out over the desert valley and I slipped into that state again. And I wrote a poem called After Letting Go about it. I'm not going to read it to you, but the bottom line is once I let go of all my concepts and thoughts and fears, we were out in the desert, right? And there's this moment where I could see colors I couldn't see before. You know, I could see as the sun rose, colors shimmering across the valley. And it was just that moment. You know, we all do things to get back to that, right? So the question is, you know, how do, maybe in the next few minutes, don't have too much, how much time do I have? 6 minutes? Yeah, so how do you repeat that? It always seems to happen when we're not thinking about it. It always seems to happen. Listen to all those stories. It's a moment of letting go of the ego's limitations, of the egos, of our fears, and something causes us to let go. And suddenly we're in the moment. I always had this little sign here on my desk, which we used to, it's backwards, it says be here now.
Maybe it's not to them.
There we go. And, you know, to me, it's always a reminder when my thoughts are whirling around. I'm judging myself, judging others, judging political figures. I just remind myself, just be here now, just be present. And it's my mantra because that's where the infinite is in the present moment, not in our thoughts, not in our beliefs. No matter how beautiful our beliefs are, they're still thoughts. They're still approximations of the greater reality. And so what I found is just a practice of letting go. Just let go of whatever, you know. And does anyone have some advice on how to repeat this experience that we've all had, I'm sure? What are your thoughts on it? Whitney?
I feel my experience is very small, but I've met many friends, people that have had enormous, huge experiences of the infinite, of God, of self-realization. And I think there's two paths to go. And my husband was one of them. And it was like yearning to repeat that experience, that it was so delicious and so overwhelmingly, you know, huge that nothing else could compare. And there was always the yearning to go back to it. And I always felt that the other way is that is trusting that it's assimilated, and that, as Adyashanti used to say, it's already here right now. And it's very easy to, I think we experience it in this group many, many times, that I'll call it the oneness, or the magnificence of the oneness of all of us and of everything. And it's really almost a change of a thought. It's just simple, and allowing that, or asking for it. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you. Linda.
I know that if I come from the heart, which isn't my head, I'm there. I'm right there.
Hmm.
But the head likes to be involved.
That's so true.
Well said.
My reminder is a quote, I think it's from Dylan Thomas, but I've never been able to find it. It's just in my head all the time, is the force that drives the green fuse through the asphalt path drives my life spinning, And I just remember that force that, I've actually seen in England, where it rains a lot, grass coming up through asphalt paths, right? Literally, that force that drives the green fuse through the asphalt path. It drives all of our lives, but so often we don't notice it. So often our ego takes over and wants to be right about whatever. But if we could just learn to let go of our ego's chatter, our need to be right, and just lay back and float downstream, like the Beatles said. I've done that. And we had a river on the farm, and I used to, it wasn't dangerous river, but just lay back and float downstream. It is not dying. Yeah. So it's answering that voice that's inside of us. Please let go. We're swimming the ocean of beauty, of presence. Float downstream. Anyway, that's my presentation. Any other thoughts before we move on? Sam.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Paul, for this presentation. So often I've heard people talk about enlightenment, and it all seems very abstract to me. And it's wonderful to be able to talk about it in terms of each of our individual experiences that approximate enlightenment and bring us closer to that ground of being, or the level below that. So thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I think you're helping all of us. Beautiful.
My pleasure. Helping myself.
Afton, did you want to say something?
I want to piggyback on Sam. In addition, this kind of a morning brings us closer to each other by knowing another part of ourselves. It's one of my favorite ways of being in the group. So thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.